Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on fortifying your offboarding process. We'll also be going over user lifecycle management and deprovisioning today. I'm McKenna. I work alongside the tech experts here at Chaosoft. Just a couple housekeeping items to go over before we jump into the presentation. First off, you'll notice that your microphones are muted just to make sure everybody has the optimal listening experience. But we do encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. So depending on how you join today, either in the browser or through the app, you'll see a question or chat section in the meeting dashboard. Feel free to drop your questions there and we'll do our best to answer them. If we run short on time today for questions, we'll reach out to you directly to follow up. At the end of the presentation, we'll also be doing a drawing for one lucky winner of a $100 Amazon gift card. Make sure you stay on the line until then, as we draw from the list of participants at that time. This session will also be recorded, and we'll email you a link in the days following to share with your team. At the end of the presentation, we'll also be sharing our contact information. If you have any additional questions then, or are watching this on demand, please feel free to reach out. So today we've got a great webinar for you on securing your onboarding and offboarding processes. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our speaker today. With us today, we have founder and CEO of Chaosoft, Robert Boble. Bob is one of the leading experts in hybrid Active Directory management, and with more than 25 years in the Microsoft identity industry, he's definitely gained tons of insight and best practices. So you guys are in great hands today. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Bob.
Hey, McKenna, thank you very, very much. I'm pretty excited. This seems to be a really hot topic. I know when the marketing team came to me and said, hey, we have an open slot. Do you want to do a session? I said, of course. And we started looking around for topics, and literally that day, we had first started hearing the term the Great Resignation. This is something that I had heard but didn't quite understand, and then as we started looking at it, we realized that they were talking about the fact that there's a higher number of people resigning from their job for a number of reasons, which we'll mention we think are involved here. But that really drove home the thought that you really have a lot of people leaving, and a lot of people who are leaving have high levels of access within the organization, which means people are going to have to be very careful about terminated employees or employees who are retiring or fired, quit, leave, whatever, because they have been trusted to work within the assets or the resources of their organization. Now they're gone, they're no longer there, and there are a lot of things that should happen there. So when we started putting this together, we went out and started looking at evidence of what was actually going on, and the Federal Reserve and Microsoft had some data that explained pretty clearly what the heck this Great Resignation meant, just from a numbers standpoint. And so some of the things that were being said were, hey, we're seeing turnover at a record rate in the United States, a quitting trend, unlike anything we've seen in the past two decades, was one of the magazines we found. And this little exit door at the bottom left, the 41%, was from a Microsoft study they did a couple of months ago. And basically their survey included a question, are you considering leaving your current employer? And 41% of the respondents came back. That's more than half. And that's in addition to the people that already had left, right? So there's quite a few people looking at making a change. And there wasn't just one answer that stood out, other than, these are people who felt, confined during the pandemic, or just maybe just not happy or contented with the way their life was going. And so being at home, a lot of people studied, did different things, decided what they wanted to do. A lot of people had time to sit and think, and decided that they were going to go do something different, maybe with their lives, or go to different employers, et cetera. The Fed, their economic research group, has been tracking this, and I think, McKenna, you said it was since like earlier this year, I think it was, or late last year. In any event, they're seeing a trend. They saw a spike in April, and then pretty low in May. Now it's climbing back up, and now it's the highest they've had on record in August. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in September and October. We're just now hearing this, so my suspicion is that it's continued, and that September, October will be worse, if not better, than the previous. But my point is really clear and really simple. A resignation is an insider threat to your organization, period. If you go to Google, you go to Bing, you go to Yahoo, whatever your search engine du jour is, and you put fired employee or former employee hack, or you put in revenge hack, former employee, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of examples of security companies or analyst companies citing specific incidents where former employees caused problems. And so if you start to think about a resignation as an insider threat, not just, hey, Bill retired, great, bye, Bill. It starts to become clear that this is a very serious form of cyber attack that you want to be very, very wary of, and you need to start being serious. So, the one thing that's universal now is I talk to IT leaders and administrators and senior architects, is that they all have realized it's not, if they get hacked someday, it's when they get hacked someday. So that's a new mindset that we really haven't had until over the last maybe 2 years or so. A lot of people have adopted that earlier. Not saying not everybody did that, but the majority of people just didn't think that way. Now I think that trend's changed. So resignations, terminations, they are definitely insider threats to your organization. They can, as we saw that there are quite a few different situations where people, retire, they pass away, they're fired, they quit for other reasons, et cetera. Even within an organization, if it's large enough, that can actually be a threat because they may still have access to data in other parts of the organization that they shouldn't have. And ultimately, the worst result here would be an outage, right? So that the entire organization is taken down because of some insider threat, which again could be a resignation. There are often in these things, security related problems. Sometimes it's less about security and compliance. I was reading one article where a really upset employee had hacked back in and took revenge on the CEO. And what they did was they, in real time, while the CEO was giving a presentation to the board of directors, they started inserting inappropriate images into the presentation. It seems funny, but it's really deadly serious because that CEO is responsible for financial compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley. And if they had inserted false numbers for the board rather than what they had done, then suddenly they've violated their SOX requirements. And now that would not only likely result in fines, it could actually result in the CEO going to prison. So that gets to be pretty serious. And so people don't want to pay, fines because of those things. Now, it also oftentimes involves stolen property or loss of intellectual property, same thing. Direct loss of revenue, stealing money, or doing something that would cause the company to lose money. And the hardest thing to recover from actually is reputation. Doing something that damages the company's reputation. I will be honest, I shop at, my daughters love me taking them to a store we have in our town called Target. But every time I put my credit card at their checkout counter, I wonder, is it corrected? Is it safe? Because they were hacked. It was an insider threat that they had left a back door open for a vendor account. The vendor didn't clean it up and didn't tell them to clean it up. And then suddenly somebody got access to that shouldn't. But that will always stay with me, I think, and so it's very difficult to repair a damaged reputation in those cases. In particular, two things that you're going to see most frequently are revenge hacks. We'll give you a couple examples here in a minute. That's where an employee feels disgruntled or upset, and they go and they do something that's malicious or something to embarrass people within the company or take their revenge, hence the name revenge hacks. And you also see a lot of compliance fines where people did something that they took information out of the organization that was privileged or something, and that violated legal or regulatory compliance, and so they get hit with fines. And three of the more popular, more well-known regulatory environments that people are in are Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the middle, that's all public companies. PCI is payment card industry. That's anybody who accepts credit cards. You're going to be under those things. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, that's one that covers patients in medical situations. And so if you're in the United States, you've been to a doctor in the last 8-10 years, some point you've had a piece of paper or electronic thing put in front of you saying you're okay with their HIPAA stuff. Now on the right, there's some interesting stats that I think bear talking about just briefly. So the two center ones, 47% and 31, are from Ponemon Institute. They have watched over the last couple of years the frequency of insider attacks or insider threats, and overall they're up about 47%. That's a lot. And if you look back year over year, it's continually getting worse and worse, right? So it's definitely causing more problems, and 31% increase in the average cost of those insider threats. And those are up to 11.4, 11.5 million per incident. So they're extremely expensive in terms of what it costs the organization when it happens. Now, this one at the bottom right-hand corner is from a report from a group called Cybersecurity Drive, and it's fascinating to me. So they started tracking data exposure events since the beginning, or the predicted beginning of the Great Resignation. So this has only been 5 or 6 months, and they've already seen during this time frame of the Great Resignation a 61% increase in data exposure incidents. That's where you'll see a leading retailer or some hospital system get hacked or have their information exposed. Somebody takes home the wrong information and that's found on a hard drive in an alley someplace, those types of things. So that isn't enough to say definitively that it's connected to the Great Resignation, but observationally it sure looks like it might be. So this stuff is real, it's happening, and you have to be prepared for it. So why is deprovisioning so critical? Just to emphasize what can happen, here are 3 examples. There was a network administrator in San Francisco. He thought his bosses, his supervisors were incompetent. So when he left, he refused to give up the system passwords, so they couldn't get into the systems to make changes. That's pretty bad, holding your employer hostage because you think you're smarter than everyone else. Who knows? He might have been. You never know. Network engineer for a gas company found out he was going to be let go, and so he went to all the systems and rebooted them back and restored them to used restore mode to take them back to their factory default settings. That's creative but damaging. And then this last one is really interesting. A terminated worker had stolen forms containing patient information and then filed a bunch of fraudulent income tax returns based on that data. So these are things that are recent, they've happened, they continue to happen. I know of another situation where there was an old-fashioned mainframe administrator, and he cost the company something like, I want to say it was $385,000, because after he was terminated, he still had access to the systems. He logged back in and used that network access to start deleting data. Now, we're specifically all about the Microsoft environments, but it doesn't necessarily just end at Microsoft. It could end at a lot of things. And so a lot of people in the past have turned to user provisioning and deprovisioning to sort of protect themselves from this. But this is a perfect example. When you have somebody that leaves, you need to lock down their access. And I also, a moment ago, mentioned HIPAA and SOX, and those, they all have sections in their regulatory descriptions that talk about, or their compliance descriptions that talk about revoking access for terminated employees in a timely fashion, which means fast enough that they're not going to get in there and mess something up. So we see when we talk to customers, working with customers, two basic methods. It's either manually deprovisioning the users, going out and doing all those steps and all the different disconnected systems they might have to touch. It may only be Azure Active Directory in the cloud and Active Directory, legacy Active Directory on premise, but then you need to do the cleanup too, right? So, and each system, even from Microsoft, has a different management interface, a different way it deals with security. And so there's a lot of different steps. So manually terminating a user is not an easy process. It's not just as easy as going, say, disable, because really to lock the user account down, there's a lot of considerations. I'm going to show you some of those just in legacy Active Directory, and then I'm going to talk about how those kind of also apply in some cases to Azure Active Directory in the cloud. The second way is what we call automated or automatic deprovisioning. We say automated because it's sometimes a user kicking off the event, like a help desk person goes in and they'll run a script that starts the user deprovisioning process. That in itself has some issues. Distributing scripts is not an easy thing to do, even with PowerShell and some of the more modern things that Microsoft provides. And then there are third-party tools. We're hoping third-party tools is the way you go, because that's what we do, and we definitely have a process for doing automatic deprovisioning. So my big recommendation is you don't just look at this as a deprovisioning webinar, that you look at this as a user lifecycle webinar. And there are a couple of kind of fun terms that we use when we're talking to customers that are a little less boring than user provisioning and deprovisioning and whatever. We call the folks that are entering and exiting a relationship with your organization joiners. Those are the people that you're hiring, or contractors that are going to be working for you. Movers, people who change job titles, they get promoted, demoted, they move between offices, etc. And then leavers, those are the folks that you need to lock down access, so they no longer have access to things. And then there's cleanup, right? If it's Microsoft, you want to go back and get that Office 365 or Microsoft 365 license, because that stuff's expensive, and you want to get the best return on your investments. You don't want to go out and buy 10 more licenses. If you have 10 deprovisioned users, you want to go get the existing licenses that are not used and return them to the pool of licenses, right? So we have a little spinning wheel here on the right, and obviously it starts with giving the user an account. If you're in a hybrid environment, which is about 70% of enterprises using Microsoft today, you have, obviously then at least 2 environments you're going to be provisioning into: on-premise Active Directory, maybe on-premise Exchange, maybe some group memberships, things like that. And then you're going to have some of that in the cloud. A lot of people realize that they need to do a synchronization in between there, and that can take a little bit of time. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's just the start. That is just the start. Then it's assigning access or giving access to resources. Sometimes those resources are called entitlements, right? What are you entitled to as an engineer within my organization? You're entitled to get an access to the drawing system. You're entitled to, get a swipe badge for the door that checks against Active Directory to make sure you're still employed with us. And then you have those movers, right? So on a day-to-day basis, you can have people getting married and it's a tradition that they, may change their name during that process. Could be that they get transferred. Big project comes up, or big promotion or demotion, and so they move within the organization. And then at some point, it's time. Every person, you don't live forever, right? So at some point, there will be a separation between that individual employee and the organization. And that's the deprovisioning. And again, now all that stuff that you've done when the account was created and given access rights, and then all those things that have been changed all now have to be undone. And so just blocking or disabling the account is not enough. It's not safe. And so what you need to do is you actually need to go back and then do the cleanup as well. So that's what we mean by lifecycle management. Now, this whole thing has to be protected because mistakes will be made. Accounts are going to be deleted inadvertently. Access is going to be inadvertently revoked. So you not only need to have a process here, you also need some way to monitor this for change, and then perform recovery if something goes awry and somebody makes a heinous mistake, or if you find somebody trying to attack this process. So a couple of things that lifecycle management also give you, which is pretty cool, is the ability, especially if you're doing it with the automated or automatic method, is to enforce the organizational standards that you use within the business or within your organization. So one of the things that is enforced in every organization is likely to be unique email addresses. That may not be for things like shared mailboxes or something silly like that, but for individual users, it's almost universal that they're going to have a unique logon, and it's probably going to follow a specific format. And so you're going to need to sort of look for those things. And you're going to need to understand this too if you're the person implementing an automated provisioning or an automatic provisioning system. A couple of other things, there's going to be some way to map users in on-premise Active Directory to cloud Active Directory. Well, before that, if you're going to really start to do automated provisioning, you're going to have to figure out what's the link between the names I have in my HR system or my enterprise resource planning ERP system, or if I'm a educational group, a student information system. It might be employee ID. You may actually have unique email address in there. Could be a number of things. But you'll have to kind of understand that and plan that accordingly, but it'll enforce that across those systems. What entitlements do the people get, and are there specific security features that they need to run, or specific security policies or compliance policies that they need to fall under? So like, for example, if you're not familiar with, there's something called a litigation hold or a legal hold that you can place on Microsoft mailboxes, which basically retains data for a certain amount of time. So if there's an investigation, they'll have access to the emails that went in and out of that mailbox. So you have to consider those things. And then there's just plain configuration of that stuff, right? So for example, one of the things that you can set when you create a mailbox, and just another example based on mailbox here, when the person hits the reply button, is it reply just to the individual who sent the message that they're replying to, or is it a reply to all people on the message? That's a setting that you can provision. And that is something people look for when they're in that process. They get that granular. So if you're going to do it completely automatic user provisioning, you're going to have some source of the data. And here are some tips or some traps that you can fall into. You got to really know who's going to be joining, who just changed, and who's leaving. Those are the three, joiners, movers, and leavers. And in your HR, ERP, or SIS data, sometimes that can be very clear, and sometimes it can be a little muddy. So you have to understand sort of what's going on. It may be that before you automate things, there is no communication between HR or whoever's managing your authoritative data and the IT team. It may be you have a process where somebody shows up at a factory door, and the manager meets them and walks them over to IT, and they get an account, right? They don't, IT is never told that person's going to be there. It's just the manager's authority allows them to do that. And so oftentimes we actually see the deprovisioning side being worse, where somebody leaves and 6 months later, they still have access because nobody told IT that they needed to revoke that access. So that's a big gotcha. The HR data is oftentimes updated at a different rate than what you might find in the field, right? Actually in a location, or somebody using especially like in Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. It may be that your HR folks only update their data maybe once a month, or maybe only on specific types of changes like a marriage or something like that. Or it could be HR is getting their data from payroll, and so when somebody's termed, they know faster than anyone else in the organization that person's no longer with them. That's kind of a great check and balance, because if that is the situation where there's that interplay, the stopping of a paycheck is a pretty good and clean way to determine somebody's likely not working. It could also be that they're on some sort of extended leave, so you have to take those things into consideration as well. It may be that your HR data cannot be accessed or is in some weird format that is just not usable, right? The data is in 50 database tables of some unknown type, and determining how things are related might not be realistic. We've seen that. Be careful of that one. There's people who have spent a lot of time trying to figure that stuff out. Usually you'll find some consultants or something that'll help you. And the data itself can be in complex formats. So it may be that they convert the hire date into some other way, sidereal time, right? Well, nobody other than rocket scientists use sidereal time, but it's a different format for date and times that makes it easier for them to keep track of things in their applications. But it also could be the data is incomplete. That's another particular situation we see quite a bit. But you're going to have to work with your HR folks to see. Now, most of the time, you can get access to that data. Most of those systems are on a database, and they can create a view for you, or they can provide a feed. And there's kind of one universal law that almost every HR, ERP, or SIS system, they will output a text file. So if when in doubt, ask for a text file, and you usually will be able to get it. And the HR folks prefer that sometimes because it doesn't have salary information, doesn't give the IT folks access. Understanding the actual data that's within the HR system or within even Active Directory can be a little tricky. They're often a unique, either a single field, a piece of data, or multiple fields that make every record unique. Sometimes it's as simple as a employee ID that's unique. Sometimes there is no employee ID and it's a combination of things. Usually there's one field that could be just a counter field. So the next person just gets another number. And then the date time stuff is interesting. You're really going to want to be able to figure out who has been added at a certain date and time, who's changed or moved around, and who has been terminated. So you're going to need that information at a minimum. And that can take some time, understanding the data if you're going to do that. So that's one of those big areas that in order to implement an automated or automatic provisioning system, most of the time you're going to have to spend a little time there. Now, doing manual management has some hidden costs. And we mentioned that earlier. There's a lot of different disconnected systems. You have to visit lots of steps. They're different between systems, et cetera. But I wanted to just give you an idea of some of the basic things that you're going to do. You're going to have to create some accounts. That's pretty interesting. For the Microsoft hybrid environment, you're likely going to assign Office 365 or Microsoft 365 licenses. Then you're going to have to populate a bunch of groups to give them access, or roles if they're administrators. And if you're doing that in an automated fashion or automatic fashion, it's usually between 30 seconds and 2 or 3 minutes. If you're doing it natively, it can be an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours. I have seen in some distributed companies where the login account is created, and then there's a note sent over to the mail team that they need to create a mailbox, and then it goes to the SharePoint team, and then it goes to the mainframe team. It could take weeks or months. And I still see that today. Just a couple months ago, I was talking to a customer, and they said, hey, we get the basic account done in an afternoon, but then it takes time. And if you're just on the keyboard doing that stuff manually, it literally will take you 10, 15 minutes just to get the 2 accounts done, not to mention that if you have to set up mailboxes with a remote mailbox and all that other stuff. So, you're talking anywhere between, $30 to, a very extreme $160 per person to bring them on board. It's less than $1 if you're doing it with an automatic or semi-automated process. And since we're talking about deprovisioning, you have to unwind all that too. So not only do you have to unwind it because it's a security threat, it's got a cost, right? May not be as big as provisioning because, let's face it, it's probably easier to delete things and remove things. But then you also lose historical tracking. So to do it right, it's probably about the same amount. So, anywhere between 30 and 160 bucks. So if you only hire 1 or 2 people or lose 1 or 2 people a year, it's not going to be that big a deal. But if you're a larger organization or you're in an organization that has a lot of turnover, like seasonal industries, it could be very, very expensive to do this and time consuming. And that will delay getting people working, right? So just remember what is done has to then at some point be also undone. And this doesn't even take into consideration the 10,000 or 30,000 group membership changes you're going to make because people change departments or offices, et cetera. So it can be quite expensive. Automation can have expenses behind it as well. Let's just point it out. Like if you go and look at third-party tools, you have to pay for those software products, right? I mean, we charge for our tools because we expect that the cost benefit is greater to you than you going off and trying to do scripts, which have their own set of hidden costs. So before I go any further, I want to explain what you're seeing on the screen. It looks like a bunch of boxes with some dithering in them. Well, it turns out this is an actual customer script we scaled down. We actually took it out of the PowerShell file it was in, put it in Word, 10-point font, so it's a small font, single spaced, and it's still 19 pages. And all this did was add a single user. So you type the script name, it would say what's the first name, middle name, and last name. You'd enter it. Then it would ask you a bunch of questions. So it was semi-automated, and it still took 19 pages. Well, their PowerShell person, they quit, they resigned, and they were stuck with this and could not maintain it. So they came to us. They did not have a deprovisioning script, and so they had to maintain this. Well, scripts are kind of a challenge at some point because they require escalated privileges to run. So sometimes you can't delegate them. You can't just say, hey, go do this. You have to actually come up with some scheme to either embed the password, which has some issues, or empower that help desk person and hope to goodness that they don't make some kind of weird mistake or use that power in a way they're not supposed to, which is escalating their own privilege. They're complex. People that write these are not developers. They don't understand that if Microsoft APIs change, they have to regression test periodically, and they just aren't true developers. And so even understanding formats and so it takes a long time to build the scripts. It becomes very expensive to the organization, and then off you go. Systems change. Sometimes Microsoft does it without telling. We have that happen. And if you don't think about a scenario, you might not test for that scenario, and it can cause a problem. We have seen thousands and thousands of people who have been subject to outages with Office 365 because people tried to script license assignments and they didn't understand how it worked. And so it would run until Microsoft changed the license, and then it would break. And when it broke, then all those people, because the process that they had to go through, would lose their license. I know of one group that had 3,000 or 4,000 people that had their license revoked accidentally. And then finally, do you really want to run your business on, just on these big scripts? Little scripts, I don't have a big problem with because they're designed to automate some little process or piece. But, there are lots of examples out on the internet. Are these people really great at what they did if they built that example? And then am I good enough to manage and monitor the changes that are needed to that script in order to make it work for me? I don't know that answer. One of the things, I'll be honest, we look at in the cost of our product is what would it cost you to hire a person to do all that? We kind of figure, well, if we're at that for just this piece, then it's probably pretty good value to you. So that's one of the factors that we actually look at in the way we look at our software. Interesting, for SysOps, it's a website dedicated to Microsoft Tech. 65% of the people surveyed said that they didn't have time or they didn't have the background. These are people working in your Active Directory and running your systems. Those folks just couldn't manage to manage a PowerShell script for these things. All right, I'm going to do just a real quick demo. I have three brief demos. I want to mention a free tool we have. I'm going to show you semi-automated provisioning, and I'm going to show you automatic provisioning. So this is a little tricky for me. I'm going to jump over to my VM. Oops, that's the wrong one. So I'm actually looking at the on-premise side of Active Directory. I'm in a hybrid environment. This is my local laptop. And I have opened up Active Directory users and computers. And I have a structure here. It's a single domain, pretty simple, but I have a bunch of folders where I have users. Here it happens to be Columbus. And on just the legacy Active Directory side, just Active Directory, not including Exchange or any of those other things, I have a user that I need to term, Allison Anthony. And I wanted to mention this because it's a free tool from Chaosoft. We only have one software download. Just go get our installer and download it. It's part of that. Once you install it, it actually creates a brand new menu entry in Active Directory user computers called Suspend, and it does what it says. When I click on it, it brings up a nice little window. Here, I'll change the screen height a little bit. And we've gone through and created a utility that will help you lock down accounts. So if you only had Active Directory, this might be all you need. First of all, with this utility, the free version, you can only really suspend immediately. That means it's got to be done as soon as I hit the submit button at the bottom. If you have to suspend somebody at noon on Friday, then that requires our Chaosoft Administrator product, which is our provisioning and deprovisioning automation product. And then we also have undo suspend, by the way, so we can undo this. So that's one of the little areas that we look at what we do in terms of when is it executed. The next thing, what do we do to the account to lock it down, disable it, set the manager's access to a home folder? That's kind of old fashioned, isn't it, right? But that's legacy Active Directory. What do you want to do with the password? We typically scramble it. Clear out a bunch of attributes and then set one to saying suspended by Bob at this date and time. Kind of a nice little reference. Hide it from the global address list, do a bunch of other things. Move it to a pending or holding OU for disabled accounts. Clear up all the group membership. But hey, by the way, we record all this. So if you did it to the wrong person, you could right click and undo that and it would roll it all right back. It's pretty cool stuff. And that's also, that piece is free as well. Object retention, do you want to retain it? Again, this object retention requires our other product. We're pretty clear on that here. You have to have Chaosoft Administrator to do that. But for example, you might be required to hold an account for 90 days and for various reasons, then you physically delete it. And we do that, right? So then how do you want to store the recovery information? So I'm just going to submit that. Do you want to view the report? Yeah, I want to take a look at that. There we go. Nice little report. Shows me all the groups that they were a member of, all the before and after values, who did it, when it was happening. I can go out here and see all the listed groups, whatever. Oops, I got the copy right there. Okay, cool. Now, if I need that user again, that person's gone, and that's because we moved it to obsolete objects, right? So there's Allison Anthony. If I right click, I can view that same report I just saw, or I can say undo that suspend, bring them right back. And then basically we're reprovisioning the user. What do you want to do with the password? Because I'm not using administrator in this case, I have to do it immediately. Submit it. I'll do a quick, yep. I'm not going to look at the report, which it actually reversed everything. If I jump back over here to Columbus, Allison Anthony is back. Oops, let's refresh. Sorry, I forgot ADUC has a little refresh problem here. There we go, perfect. So that kind of shows you the free tool. Now, how do we do this? Now, as part of our paid product, we have a web portal, and this allows you to delegate out suspend without all those choices. You can actually take what you just saw, all those different choices as an administrator, create what we call a suspend policy. Then you can also attach that to a suspend policy for Office 365. So for example, here's that same user, Allison Anthony. This is likely a hybrid user, but let's go check that. So I'm looking in Columbus Active Directory. We call these administrative units or admin units, virtual admin units. This is actually mapped over to an OU, and I have exactly the same navigation that I would have on premise over here for Office. So I can come over here and look at users in Columbus in a Office 365 admin unit or just by query. So let's see if Allison Anthony, sure enough, and they're licensed, right? So they have a license. So I know this user needs to be terminated. I can do it from here, or I can do it from the Columbus admin unit. By the way, this is a big feature of our product. We work with both your on-premise legacy Active Directory and your cloud directory simultaneously. You don't have to know where things are. We keep all that sorted for your help desk and day-to-day administrators to make their lives easier. So I select that user. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to find suspend user. Suspend immediately or on a specific date and time. It says, hey, by the way, you have to have the scheduling system and a policy set up. I don't have that set up for right now. So I'm just going to say suspend immediately. And if it was a help desk ticket, it might be 5, some weird number up there. And that gets put into the audit log. So I'll go ahead and click suspend. Now this is going to take a couple of minutes because it's now in a semi-automated fashion. I actually told it which user. I told it where to go to suspend them. And so it's going to go out and actually suspend that user using whatever policies I put in place. Now, while that's working on suspending the user, let's jump back over to our automation console. So my suspend policy for the Office 365 side is what we call a rule. And if I come down here to web admin rules and I come out to the bottom, you'll see here's suspend Office 365. That's undo, sorry, here's suspend Office 365 user, almost had it. This is that rule that is actually executing to suspend the Office side. We have another one that's for Active Directory. So let's go open this up and you'll see all the things. Now, you saw what we were doing on the legacy AD side, and I can save that as policy and import it here. But now you're seeing prevent clean up the user in Office 365. So, block the login, scramble the password, put the mailbox on any type of hold you need. Delegate the mailbox, convert it to a shared mailbox and revoke the license, disable all the protocols in the mailbox, remote wipe the device that they have, set their out of office message, pick up OneDrive settings so the manager has permission or administrators do, and then any ownership of groups and what to transfer to the manager. So we do quite a bit of stuff. It just executed here a moment ago. If I jump back over here to my web portal, you'll see these are up, it finished and brought up the dialog. These are all the things it did. So there's the AD side, then here's the Office 365 side. And so that account is now locked down. Now I don't have it set for permanent termination, but it's there and ready to go. Now it's permanently suspended, and we know we told it to move that user to that other folder, and it did all that, right? So in Active Directory, it's actually now off in that obsolete container. I could go restore it if I needed to. So what happens if you accidentally delete a user, right? That's different from suspend. So let's do that. So here I have Allison Stanley. Let's go over here and click delete. This is hard delete, right? This is, hey, I'm just going to kill this account. I'll click remove child and its contents just in case. We'll hit delete. There we go. Uh-oh, look at that. It's gone. So now I have an issue. That user has been deleted. How do I bring that user back? Well, that's our second component to our unified solution, which is called Chaosoft Guardian. I'm going to step over here and I'm going to log into Chaosoft Guardian, and I'm going to come, oops, got some kind of weird error there. And I'm going to look in what we call change history. And here is the changes that I just saw being made to Allison Anthony. And so I have a complete change history of everything happening on-premise and in cloud. And in a few moments, you'll actually see that, well, right there it is. There's Allison Stanley, I think it was, that we just deleted. And if I come down here, well, there's the account. It was actually hard deleted. So I need that account. Maybe that was just a simple mistake. So let's go look at the details here. Here are all the details. Click one button to restore that user. And now it's submitted that, and within a few moments, that account will be back for me. Okay, good. So we come back over here. We'll do another search. It's been put back. That's an undelete, right? Now, I could navigate out to that other OU, that obsolete objects OU, and do an undo suspend and bring this the non-destructive version back as well. But this is part of our solution, is to even capture or provide the ability to recover if somebody accidentally deletes a user group or any other object or changes the data. A couple weeks ago, we had a customer. They had a group was being used to assign licenses in Office. They eliminated out of it was a really large group, 4,400 medical workers. So on Friday, 4,400 medical workers lost their ability to use Teams, to email, to use their phones, everything. They used that Guardian tool of ours. They saw the change. They clicked restore it, put it all back, and within a couple minutes, those people were back up and online. So last thing I'm going to do, just really quickly, is show you that we also have fully automated provisioning. So this solution is the Administrator Automation Console. This is all based on PowerShell, .NET, and web services. So it's technology you hear about all the time. It's pretty modern. And what we do is we create what we call run books that are basically workflows. So here's a workflow that is for grabbing information from a text file. And once it does that, it creates a bunch of Active Directory users. It then updates some attributes for their addresses, which didn't come in the text file. So it knows what building they're in, and it adds an address to the account in the Active Directory. It then creates an Office 365 user account, assigns a license, creates an Exchange on-premise remote mailbox for true hybrid Exchange. Then because the license is provisioning a mailbox, it goes off and waits and configures the mailbox in the cloud, because that's where the person's going to be working. Then it's going to move them in Active Directory to the correct OU. And then if there are any additional groups or teams, that they need to be given access to, whether they're on-premise or cloud, we put them into that with that last rule. Let's go in and just take a look, for example, on this mailbox settings rule to give you sort of the level of detail that we do for these things. So here it is. These are what we call a rule. As I come down here, you'll see that, hey, whoever was created and falls within the scope of this rule. You can set the size limit if you're allowed, retention of the mail, litigation hold, legal hold, how the mailbox auditing is configured, email, the Outlook settings. We were talking about focus inbox or reply to all. I mentioned those earlier. So we give you everything you need to do those, including license assignment by Active Directory group, license assignment by office group, by any attribute. So if you just want to assign a particular license to anyone in Topeka, Kansas, you could do that as long as that's one of the license or one of the user attributes. And we have something else called a license profile, which allows you, if you're still using manual provisioning, you can just create a name. All engineers in Columbus. That could be the name of your licensing profile, and it might have business apps. It might have an E3 with some other component. The person assigning it doesn't have to know that. You create those, or your licensing expert creates those ahead of time. They just have to say, oh, this is my engineer. He's in Columbus, so I assign this profile, and it automatically assigns the license, and then on an ongoing basis enforces it. If something happens and somebody goes natively and removes that, that tool will automatically put back the license as it should be. Pretty good stuff. That's all part of our provisioning. Now, this provisioning is not just about user creation. We also have hybrid update, hybrid delete, and it all starts very simply. It all starts with me saying I want to provision some hybrid users. So on our very first page, I click hybrid provisioning. I tell it what the data source is and what I want to do. I basically follow the wizard. This can be set up typically, if you're using a text file, it can be set up in an afternoon. So pretty good return on value for these things. So with that, I'm actually going to come up and I'm going to switch back over to the presentation and close up here a little bit. A couple things about us, Chaosoft. I think we're known as Microsoft management, change auditing, and recovery experts. Those are the three solutions we deliver. We're pretty well known by our, to our competitors as being pretty innovative in what we do. We have really good support, and not to toot our own horn, but one of the ways we know that is because we have a 99.8% customer retention over the past several years. When we get a customer, we work hard to keep them every year. It is subscription based, and so we're very focused on making sure we're delivering what we need to make sure that the customer sees value and that we're there when they need us. All of our development is customer focused, meaning we're listening to customers, find out what problems they have, looking for bigger solutions, meaning things that might solve larger problems and eliminate some of these little issues that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. We're very good at root cause analysis. We really have a single unified approach that works either on-premise, in cloud, or across your hybrid. And that means from one pane of glass, you're going to be able to do things like delegation of management, automation. You're going to be able to do recovery of either objects or data, and also a complete change history of what's going on both on premise and cloud. And we do correlate that with event logs, so we don't really miss anything. Focus on security, compliance, and efficiency in those areas of management, change monitoring, and recovery. And to just give you sort of a quick picture, those are the three things we do. Specifically for Microsoft, although we do offer a little bit for Google, and that's an emerging area for us. You check back periodically to see what we provide there if you're also a Google user. And by the way, if you don't have Active Directory, that's okay. If you just had Office 365, we work just for cloud, within cloud, and manage just that, or monitor or recover just cloud. That's Azure AD and Office, etc. We work in hybrid or just for Active Directory on premise. So we're there at any point in your journey. Just wanted to mention that as well. Here are some other customers that rely on us. So some decent names for, we're a fairly small startup. And with that, it's time to turn it back over to McKenna. And McKenna has some little bit of one item to housekeep, and then after that, she'll close it up for us. McKenna, over to you.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Great presentation. Always love to hear you speak. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. That concludes our presentation today. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. At this time, we'll go ahead and take attendance for the gift card drawing. And if you do win, we'll email you directly for more information. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us with the contact information on the right side of your screen. We also have 2 links here on the screen for you, kind of quick links that people seem to like. If you'd like to schedule a personalized demo to see it more firsthand, obviously Bob showed you quite a bit, but even more for your specific situation, that chaosoft.com/demo will get you a personalized demo with one of our experts here at Chaosoft. We also have that link for a trial. If you'd like to see Chaosoft for yourself, we have a free 25-day trial for you to test that out. And of course, for more information in general about our solutions, feel free to visit our website, chaosoft.com. Again, thank you guys so much for your time. Everybody have a great day.